That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable figures. On today's Newsmakers, we start with actor Jesse Hutch's incredible miracle survival story and his new film, Homestead. Let's welcome Jesse to Newsmakers. Well, it's good to connect with you again, Jesse. Lots to talk about today. The big project, Homestead. This looks like a wild film, and it's also a series. We'll get into that after, but this is going to be hitting theaters later this month, December 20th. What was it that made you want to take this role on?
A number of things. First of all, just the people that were doing it, the team. So, I started to meet, all the producers, the director, Ben Smallbone, started hearing rumors of other casts that they were already interested in. Jason, the writer of the original book series, Black Autumn. And so that's kind of where it started was, man, that was a really good conversation. That was a really good phone call. And then that led to coffees in person, and that went really well. And then it was kind of like, man, I really want to be a part of this if there's a way to make this happen. And there's a long story to that, but eventually it worked out, and we found a role that I think fit well. That's how it started, the team, and then B, just the material, man, like the themes, the concepts, all the characters, the world. I mean, it's super cool. And from there, I think it'll just lead to more. But then the themes, right? Like family, your life choices. What are you going to do with your life? When do you use force? When do you use grace? When do you take action? When do you listen? All these questions that I think everybody has in life naturally on a day-to-day, you're going to witness it in this movie. And then ultimately the movie leads to a TV series. So this isn't just like the end of the story.
I've got to ask you, because you dropped this bomb on me last time that we talked, and I remember being like, and you and I even talked after, I was like, we need to do a full, and we don't have the time to do it today, but a full conversation on this, because you just kind of said it like nonchalantly in passing as we were talking, and I was like, wait, you had this near-death experience where you should be dead, and you drowned and were underwater. I mean, take us through this event that happened in your life, because this is one of those life-defining moments, and it really was shocking to me to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, so how do I, again, we're running out of time and we have to jam this in.
Right, yeah, I know. It's a half an hour on its own.
Yeah, I was a whitewater raft guide. I was probably into my 5th year of doing it. And so, I was trained up, I was comfortable, ended up in the right place at the right time. And through a series of events, ended up underwater to a second sort of current stream, which is below the surface, maybe 15 feet below the surface, and just couldn't get out. So I was underwater. They estimate anywhere from 11 to 22 minutes. And I remember
no oxygen. No oxygen, obviously.
No, I was a whitewater raft guy. We're not carrying oxygen. We're not, wearing tanks. We're not. This was just me and my life jacket and my paddle and my Teva sandals, shorts. And so, yeah, I went through the whole gamut, man. I went through, and I still remember it quite vividly. And it's a miracle that I'm actually alive, breathing, talking. I can think, I can walk. I have a family, that I'm even an actor, that I can remember things, because in all reality, without oxygen, anywhere from 11 to 22 minutes, I should be completely gone.
Yeah.
But that was it. My body's kind of skitching out, trying to breathe, and eventually my body just stopped trying to breathe. My heartbeat got slower. All I could hear, water, heartbeat, slow, and then my heartbeat left, and all I could hear was the water, and then I couldn't hear anything, and then everything was just black and nothing, and I don't know how long that was. And then the next thing I knew, I started sort of seeing blurry glimpses of people, and they're sort of yelling at me, and someone's hitting my chest, and then I'm in a vehicle, and then I'm in a pressure chamber in the hospital, and then I'm in a hospital bed, and actually had a quick recovery. And was let out of the hospital quite quickly and was like, went home.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there on the edge of my bed and I'm like, what was that?
Like, what just happened?
Like, what am I doing with my life? And that's literally when God turned my life around through a series of events. And for the first time in my life, I was like, oh, I think I'm going to attempt to be an actor. That was never on my heart, never on my mind, not even an interest.
So it was that event that led you to that. It was that event, that miracle.
Ultimately, it was that event that led me to going, I really got to listen to God's voice more. I really need to stop trying to go on my own journey. And so what is that? What do you want me to do? I always loved watching movies as a kid. I collected posters, but not once was like, I'm going to be an actor. And that's where it started. I ended up going to an event that led me to, you know, into the acting world, and then little breadcrumbs just kept getting dropped. And then I sort of, it was like manna, and I just kind of kept, okay, I guess I'll go this way. Okay, and then I'll try that thing. And then, okay, is this any good? Am I good at this? Is it, you know, I'm trying to gauge in my own brain, is this talent? You know, I did not want to be the person that you see on American Idol where they're like, they're so amazing and oh my goodness, I'm so proud of them. And then they get up and you're like, oh, that's really bad. Like, yeah, your mom thinks you're good. And for years, that was like my sort of approach was like, Lord, am I a fraud? Am I in a world that I shouldn't be in? And I don't know. It's like I said, 24 and a half years later, and I just now feel like it's time to get started.
That's amazing.
I feel like now there's, you know, okay, Lord, you know, do you see a man skilled in his work? I pray that you would bring me before kings and queens and not before obscure men. And it's up to the Lord where I go. And I can't strong arm anything, especially in this business. So I know that I'm in the right place because God can pull the rug at any moment in time if he needs to teach me something or just level me out. You know what I mean?
What a crazy event and what an amazing miracle. The film is Homestead. It hits December 20th. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is great hanging out.
Please go to angel.com for more on Homestead and the Homestead series. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers.
And I slipped. I couldn't use the whole right side of my body.
I went from having a promising career as a neuroscientist to having a medical death sentence. People would pray for me, and sometimes it felt like this power that just zapped me.
So how do you know this wasn't psychosomatic, a misdiagnosis, something that was being missed in that process? Are miracles real? Do they happen today? Let's investigate.
Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, we speak with Israeli entrepreneur Oded Golan, who is bringing biblical artifacts to the masses through his Discovering the World of Jesus, Ancient Treasures from the Holy Land experience. It is currently going on right now in Atlanta. Let's welcome him to Newsmakers to share the details. We are here today to talk about Discovering the World of Jesus. This is an incredible exhibition in Atlanta, and we'll get into some of the plans you have after this is in Atlanta. But what are you hoping to accomplish through this presentation and tour?
Well, I think we are bringing once-in-a-lifetime experience to people to look at items that they will probably not have other opportunity to see. The 350 items that are presented here, most of them are from the time of Christ. They were all found in the Holy Land in Israel. And they are telling the stories that are mentioned in the New Testament, but in first hand. You're almost touching the history. Some of them are directly related even to the family of Jesus and to the followers of Jesus, and some of them to other people who lived during his time. And you can study a lot about the culture, the faith, the behavior of people during that period of time. So I feel and I know from people that just visited in the last few days that it's open, they love it. They studied a lot from this exhibition. It gave them a new perspective about some of the stories. it doesn't change faith, it doesn't change belief, but it changed somehow how do you feel and how do you see the stories that are mentioned in the Bible, in the New Testament.
Yeah, I think being able to see the things that were around, you read through the Bible, you see all of these amazing stories, and then to have artifacts to help bring that to life is a really powerful experience. Let me ask you this, and I want to get into the 350 artifacts and how you procured them and how you brought them together, but where did your interest come from in this area? Why did you start collecting artifacts, from biblical times?
Well, I started to collect antiquities at the age of 9. So
Wow.
The youngster one, and now I'm the oldest one in Israel collecting antiquities. So I was really lucky, to collect for such a long period of time. That's made the biggest and largest collection in the world of biblical archaeology items. When I was young, even, until the age of 16, 17, I had in mind that I shall be an archaeologist one day. But in life, it was changed. But I kept archaeology as a hobby and as a strong interest. And it's a wonderful hobby, especially if you understand a little bit in history and in archaeology. And I traveled a lot to so many places all over Israel, all over the Holy Land. And I collected antiquities from all the last 5 millennia. In this exhibition, we present only items that came from a very short period of time. We are talking about the early 1st century AD, the time of Jesus. A few items are from the 3rd, 4th, 5th century, because that was the time when the first churches emerged, the cradle of Christianity. But 95% of the items are from the time of Christ. And they actually tell the whole story by themselves. Some of them are even, you can see, and we are putting some quotes from the New Testament. So you look at the items, you understand exactly how is it related to the story. And it doesn't matter what age you are and what religious you are and how strong believer you are. It's fantastic, that you look at it from different angle, and it enriches you a lot.
Well, and let's talk about that a little bit, because I find it interesting. Very few people could say that they started collecting antiquities when they were 9 years old. And here you are, you've done this, you've spent your life doing this, and now you've put together, this incredible exhibition. Again, it's Discovering the World of Jesus, and we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that. But talk a little bit about faith for you and how these items have maybe enriched or changed or got you thinking more deeply about what it is that we read in scriptures.
Well, first of all, I'm coming from Israel. And in Israel, we have not even studied the New Testament. We studied the Old Bible. So I learned about the New Testament actually in a later stage of my life. You see, I was over 50, I think, when I read the New Testament for the first time, because there was a case that related to one of the items in my collection that I had actually to understand better the period of Jesus. I don't think that antiquities change faith of anyone. If you believe, you believe. If you don't believe, you don't believe. And doesn't matter what religious you have. But it connects you much better to history, to your people, and to understanding the stories and even the philosophy of the people, of Jesus in this case, the philosophy, why and how did he think this or that during his time. And it's really fascinating to do it. Many of the pieces were found in places where Jesus actually visited or had his mission in the northern part of Israel, for example. And we try to bring here pieces that open the eyes for everyone to see the story from a different angle.
Well, it's incredible, and it's, again, Discovering the World of Jesus. Appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You can go to discoveringjesusexhibit.com for more on this incredible experience. Next up, we'll be diving even deeper into global persecution and what you need to know. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers.
And I slipped. I couldn't use the whole right side of my body.
I went from having a promising career as a neuroscientist to having a medical death sentence. People would pray for me, and sometimes it felt like this power that just zapped me.
So how do you know this wasn't psychosomatic, a misdiagnosis, something that was being missed in that process? Are miracles real? Do they happen today? Let's investigate.
Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we are sitting down with Isaac Six. He's the Senior Director of Advocacy for Global Christian Relief, and he's here to talk about the most deadly nations to live in as a Christian. Let's welcome Isaac to Newsmakers. Well, I appreciate you joining me to talk about Global Christian Relief's new 2025 Red List. Now, there are a number of reports every year that we look to in the media. I know politicians look to them to understand what is happening with persecution. The Red List is really unique in some ways, but tell us a little bit about why you launched this.
Sure. Yes. Well, you're right. There are quite a few good reports that are now coming out about what's happening with Christian persecution around the world. And we think those are important. We tried to identify a need. This started a couple of years ago with in that reporting for a gap that needed to be filled. And what we found was there needed to be a report that was based entirely on well-verified, carefully reviewed sources. These are public sources that are included in a database we've commissioned called the Violent Incidents Database. And the report is built on that database. So these are sources that can be looked up, they can be reviewed. So policymakers, leaders, journalists can go in and say, wait, where did this come from? Who said this happened? And we think that's critical. A lot of other reports are sort of qualitative. They do interviews, they may take a few numbers, and then they sort of make an estimate, and that's good too. It means our report numbers can seem a little lower than some of those, but that's because we're only using numbers we can absolutely verify are true. So when you see this report and you see the numbers we're going to talk about in some of these categories, these are over the past a 2-year period, just hundreds of hours of research by many researchers pouring through this. And these are numbers that are verified and irrefutable.
Yeah, and that I think is one of the challenges here too, and you would know this better than anyone, in pulling this research, is that you're dealing in many cases in restrictive, reclusive countries like North Korea, where you're trying to pull data, and no matter what report you're looking at, I would imagine, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but there's always some undercounting because you can't capture all of it. You can only capture what you know to be true and what's being reported to you. So the problem, I guess my point is, the problem of persecution is much worse probably than we even are able to report on. Would that be accurate?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And we identify that in a section of the report called Hidden Persecution. And so we acknowledge this report, because of the way it's designed, is not going to be able to pick up a lot of the things happening in North Korea or Afghanistan. We were actually able to confirm a couple of hundred arrests of Christians in North Korea, which took a lot of research and in-depth, and is fairly unusual to be able to confirm that. But we were able to confirm that. Afghanistan, since the takeover of the Taliban, is almost a closed box. Everything is underground. We do have networks there, but it's very difficult to get any public verified reporting of persecution. So yes, you're going to see that there's some places where you don't see a lot of numbers, and it's going to differ with other reports because of that. But that's the nature of having a report that's based on public, hard, verifiable numbers. And so we're going to see some other countries where we're very clearly seeing persecution, and we have strong documented evidence of it.
Yeah, and one of the things in a lot of these persecution reports that we will often see are rankings, the worst place to essentially live as a Christian based on what happens with persecution. Now, when it comes to some of what you've done here, you actually have different categories, which I think is really helpful. You know, for instance, killing versus being displaced. Both things are horrific to different degrees, but there are people who are pushed off their farmland, let's say in Nigeria. There are also people who are being killed. And so let's just talk about the killing element first, which means it's the places where you're most likely to lose your life for being a Christian. Can you talk about where those problems are the worst and what it was like to sort of pull together that information?
Yeah. Well, the reason this report looks at violence, really the violence incident database is looking at specific violent acts of violence of different types. And that's important because I think some people, when they hear about persecution and they hear about violence, it sounds almost like it's random violence or anger or something, and it's not. Violence is actually the primary method through which, you know, persecutors are trying to drive out the church, trying to crush the church. And this isn't just random sporadic acts of anger or violence towards Christians. In a lot of these cases, this is well organized, systematic, long-term, and the overarching goal here is to crush the church and extinguish it. I mean, it's an existential crisis for a lot of these communities that we're talking about in this report. So when we look at killing specifically, that's one of the most harsh metrics, of course, and that's where Nigeria stands out. That verifies and tracks with a lot of the other reports on Nigeria. But over 2 years, we documented almost 10,000 killings of Christians, mostly in the north and middle part of that country. And again, that is systematic violence being perpetrated and led by groups like Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa Province, and then other armed groups. But I mean, the stories that go, you know, these are just numbers. We have a part of the report, though, that goes into the stories because the church in America really has to hear how horrific some of these stories are. It's not just violence. It's not just killings. It is brutal atrocities. And frankly, the church has to wake up to some of this. Only a fraction of believers in America are even aware of what's happening.
Where can people go if they want to get the 2025 Global Christian Relief Red List, if they want to download it, read it?
Yeah, you can go right to our website. That's gcrelief.org. It's on the front page of our website, or there's a drop-down box for research at the top. You can click on that and then pull up the red list, put in your email address, and you can get a full copy of the full 40-page report.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time, breaking it all down for us today, and we'll encourage people to head on over and get copies of the Red List. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Billy.
You can go to globalchristianrelief.org to see the Red List and to fully explore this important issue. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers.
And I slipped. I couldn't use the whole right side of my body.
I went from having a promising career as a neuroscientist to having a medical death sentence. People would pray for me, and sometimes it felt like this power that just zapped me.
So how do you know this wasn't psychosomatic, a misdiagnosis, something that was being missed in that process? Are miracles real? Do they happen today? Let's investigate.
That's all for today's Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel for the full interviews you saw on today's episode. And you can also check out our daily Newsmakers podcast, one full interview every single day. You can find that on your favorite podcast platform. As for this show, we will see you again next week.